Hey guys, it's Punchy. Today I have a little bit of a different video, and it's some suggestions that could be applied to Deepwoken. All of these ideas have come from Elden Ring, which is a new game from Studio From Software, and it's quite amazing. This studio has been a large inspiration for Deepwoken because it is apparent that some of their themes and creatures are the same. Deepwoken Sharko is legit a shark giant for Bloodborne. Before we start, I would like to thank you guys for the support on my latest video regarding the Lightning Vampirism build. That one was super fun to make, and we even hit 15,000 subscribers, which is a number I never thought I could reach. Thanks so much, and keep an eye out for an interesting build that I'm working on now. So I have 5 ideas I've all gotten from Elden Ring, and I think it could shape the game in a positive direction. There's no particular order or importance to this list, but it's going to be limited to 5. One thing I really enjoy and am annoyed with when I play Elden Ring is the plethora of status effects. There's a crazy amount of status effects like sleep, bleed, madness, poison, blight, frostbite, instant death, scarlet rot, and probably even more. In Deepwoken, we do have some status effects, but we're quite limited in comparison to Elden Ring's options. We have the cold effect, electricity effect, shadow, which I would hardly count, charm, and obviously fire. I wouldn't really count shadow because it doesn't really stick around. Whenever I'm playing Elden Ring, I've noticed that whenever I'm playing a build focused around applying a certain status, it's quite satisfying to trigger your effect after building up all those stacks. Similar in Deepwoken where you can build up detonation stacks or even your fire cloak in order to do a burst of damage. There are options in Deepwoken like hitting somebody with the ice daggers or ice forge while they have the cold effect, but it's not the same type of stack up build that you would do if you're stacking up fire mantras or even a bleed build in Elden Ring. The player needs to do work for the stacks of status and release it in a burst that could do something. Also on the topic of status effects, I think that status from players should do more to PvE enemies as well as more enemies that can actually apply status. In Elden Ring, there are several ways of how status effects can affect enemies, where in Deepwoken I rarely see people using mantras on PvE unless they do damage. They use mantras to do damage instead of applying a status. It could be really cool if there was more use of applying cold or even electricity tethers to a lionfish or something. Maybe they'll take more damage. Lastly, for status, I like to see more enemies applying status effects of cold, fire, and electricity, or even charm. In Elden Ring, there are many enemies that produce status effects, and it makes them a unique challenge for certain builds and players. It would make builds that spec into a certain stat, excel in their particular field against certain enemies, and they would just play like a normal player if the NPC had a resistance to the status. Something that is so special in Elden Ring is the overall feeling of dread and smallness the player can feel against certain enemies. Dragons and giants feel like they're huge in comparison to the player, and it's genuinely frightening if you encounter something that you haven't fought before. What Elden Ring uses effectively is a destructible environment. In Deepwoken, environment can light on fire, break, or even be frozen, but it isn't like this in boss arenas. The only bosses I would consider in Deepwoken would be the Duke, Ferryman, Primadon, Kaido, and I guess the Spider. Every one of these bosses, except Kaido, has little effect on the environment it is in. It would be pretty scary if you could encounter something in a grass area and it could light on fire from a dragon or something. Obviously, this might not be in the game right now due to performance issues, but if there is an entrance to a dungeon where you could teleport with a separate battle arena, teleport out to a different server, destructible environments could be contained easily and could even be less laggy as they would close as the dungeon finishes. Elden Ring does this great when they have dragons or monsters breaking through trees and foliage just to get you, and I think that this could be an option for Deepwoken. When mentioning bosses, I'm going to bring up boss-specific loot. In many games like Elden Ring, there are items that you can only receive after beating certain bosses. In Deepwoken, this is similar, but it's not quite there. There's a certain loot pool to these items that you can receive from fighting bosses, but they're not as unique as they could be. In Elden Ring, there are drops that can only be redeemed after you beat bosses, and they're usually tied to a cosmetic item. Imagine how cool it would be if you could get a Kaido tooth necklace after you beat him, or even something cool like a Primadon scale jacket. I know that certain items like Petra's Anchor or the Cerulean Dagger can only be obtained through fighting bosses like the Ferryman or Kaido, but if you think about it, it doesn't really make any sense. Why would I be killing these enemies and getting something they aren't even using? Imagine the Ferryman's coat, which is a good example of a boss-specific loot drop. Add that, or something like a physical coat to every single boss and we'll be good. Within Elden Ring, the atmosphere is everything. Sometimes you're in a dirty dungeon with no light, or sometimes you're in the most beautiful version of the Upside Down that you've ever seen. What makes some of these areas extra unique are the passive or friendly enemies that you can encounter. We already know enemies are everywhere, and it's the same thing for Deepwoken, but having those passive mobs around builds another layer of depth. Oh, I'm in a green field with sun and vegetation. Well, it would make sense if there was a deer here, and most of the time in Elden Ring there are deers. All of these passive creatures aren't meant for progression, but they do have rewards to offer. When you kill creatures like a bird or deers or wolves, which are aggressive I will admit, you will get some materials that you can use for crafting. In Deepwoken, wouldn't it be sweet if you could craft some armor by killing animals? Even if you had Umbral Obsidian and Megalodon hide, you could combine them to make a Megalodon coat with random stats. Another game that does this well on Roblox is Northwind, a Northern Canada settler survival game. If I kill a bird, I can get a feather, and with that feather, I can put it directly onto my hat. Well, in Deepwoken, we have birds and we also have hats, so if you can put 2 and 2 together, that's what they should do. I'll do a bonus one I think could be pretty great, but it's nothing too big to make an entire section. In Elden Ring, there are so many weapons that are genuinely hard to look at because they are quite disgusting and you're like, damn, imagine getting hit by that. By using basic geometry like triangles and circles, Dark Souls games uses simplicity to relate to the player. Everybody knows what a metal nail or saw is, so it's much easier to relate the pain this item could cause to the player more than something like a katana. If you're normal, you usually don't know what it feels like to get cut with a katana, and you have a more likely chance to have an accident with a nail. This is what makes a weapon more effective. If you understand how the pain is going to feel like, it's going to be something that feels like it's more effective. Moral of the story, weapons with simplistic basic ideas could have a large impact. Think of the greatsword from Berserk. I would like it if Deepwoken had some more gritty and thrown together weapons. Second part of the bonus suggestion is just high-end suits of armor for equipment. In Deepwoken, we can get lame armor like steel pauldrons and stuff, but they end up being less flashy or even weaker than the coats and jackets. It could be cool for them to add something like this from Elden Ring for players who want to have an endgame build with a knight or samurai aesthetic instead of using the coats we have today. The last idea I have from Elden Ring could be weapon special moves. I know that every single weapon has a unique block breaking move, but there could be a mantra that could be unique to every single weapon. In Elden Ring, there are things called Ashes of War, which I would consider weapon specific mantras. Your basic weapons would have normal moves like a slash or something, and that could be the same for Deepwoken. But for unique weapons, you can either add on your own Ashes of War or weapon mantras, or they could have their own. There are options like elemental effects or application of status, or even this crazy looking star move. Maybe for weapons in Deepwoken like the hero swords, there could be a tool in the hopper that could be a master's flourish with an elemental twist. Even the crypt blade could have something like ice eruption, but instead it'll just be shadow. I don't know in specific, but I really like what From Software has done to make weapons unique. And that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed Deepwoken and you'd like to see more inspirations from Elden Ring in the game, make sure to like and subscribe and share this video around, and maybe the devs will come and see it. Regardless, thank you guys for watching, and leave a comment what you want from Elden Ring within Deepwoken.